it's kind of a dark thing, and we don't want to believe that something like that could happen in our country, much less in our community, right? As you said, in our backyard, in our neighborhoods. Um, People have some films have done a disservice to survivors of trafficking and those being currently victimized. So movies like Taken. Sometimes you say what you do, and people say, "Oh, I saw the movie Taken," and I say, "Uh huh." Well, that's not really what it looks like.
You're listening to America's Healthiest City on Mike King Biz Radio Network on ESPN Richmond 106.1 and Choice 105.3. Welcome to America's Healthiest City on ESPN Richmond 106.1. I'm your host, Will Melton, and today we have Lisa Kersey from FreeKind, the executive director there. We're going to talk about a subject today that is new to this program, human trafficking. It's important for our region that we are aware of the problem. We're also going to benefit from knowing what we can do to make Richmond a healthier, more vibrant place by bringing awareness to the subject and learning what we can do as individuals to curb that. So if you are new to this program, please check out americashealthiestcity.com, where you can learn about our 10-year community partnership to make Richmond the healthiest community in America by 2033. You can contribute your ideas to the ideas board. You can leave comments on others' ideas. And if you represent a business, a nonprofit, a academic institution, or a government entity, and you're looking to invest in this mission, you can become an ambassador. It's free. We'll tell your story, and we will work together to make this a reality. So without further ado, Lisa, thank you so much for coming on the show today. We're excited to hear from you and talk more about this very important subject.
Thanks for having me. Good to be here.
Yeah. So you, I think, will be our very first guest who does not live in Richmond or the Richmond region, and we'll explain why that is here in a minute. But just for those who are listening, you and I met through some connected folks in the nonprofit space down in Hampton Roads, where I spent 15 years, and FreeKind has a presence here in Richmond, and you were looking for a growing group of advisors, and I said, yes, I would jump on board. But I've actually asked you to come here today to talk about FreeKind because I think it's an important subject. And tell folks where you're from, and maybe just a brief background on how you ended up in FreeKind, and feel free to talk more about who FreeKind is and what they do.
Sure. So I was born and raised in the Norfolk area in southeastern Virginia, and then I went to Charlottesville for my undergrad degree, and from there I ended up getting a master's in healthcare administration. And so did hospitals and health systems for a long time on the business side, doing strategic planning, business development work. And then when I had a chance, I moved a lot of places, and then circled back to Virginia and decided that what I might want to do is something slightly different. And that didn't pan out at first. I ended up back in healthcare for a short season, and then was recruited by a firm that at the time was known as Carter Riley Thomas, or CRT, and is currently Padilla. And I went to work for that agency, doing marketing, branding, communications work, specifically with healthcare. So it was a chance to do something a little bit different in the healthcare realm, and really enjoyed that work. But then I said, I really have a heart in healthcare. Had always been involved in my communities, served as volunteer for different organizations, and was looking for something like that. During my time when I was still at the agency is when I first found out about the issue of human trafficking. So that was the early 2000s. And it just really kind of pierced me, and I wanted to do something about it. And like many people, I learned about it as being an issue that happens over there, right, in other countries. And it certainly does. And I began to give to an organization to support the work over there. But I kept learning more. It kept bothering me. And, the more you look and the more you learn, the more you realize it happens here, right here in the U.S. and right here in Richmond and in Hampton Roads. Sadly, it's happening in every state in the United States. And we know that because there's reports of it through the human trafficking hotline throughout the country. So I set about to just really volunteer for an organization and stumbled upon what was then called VBJI, or Virginia Beach Justice Initiative. And they had sort of a sister organization here called Richmond Justice Initiative. And Richmond Justice Initiative, or RJI, was an organization that really wanted to get upstream of the issue of human trafficking and set out to create a prevention curriculum so that they could get into schools and equip and empower youth and those who work with them to have it not happen. Meanwhile, VBJI kind of landed in a space of working directly with survivors, and primarily those who ended up in the criminal legal system as a result of their trafficking. And then in 2021, those two organizations merged, and that became Free Kind. And so the prevention side of what we do has more of a national footprint. It's in 21 or reached 21 different states. But here in the Commonwealth, we have been serving survivors in the Hampton Roads area primarily. And the work we do is a little bit unique. And so we are expanding into Richmond.
Well, I think one of the things that is probably a surprise to a lot of listeners is that it's something that is in our backyard and isn't not prevalent. I think another thing that's notable is the perpetrators of these crimes, these very personal, impactful crimes are they want to keep it in the dark, and so the work that you're doing in the awareness space specifically is the antidote to some degree in helping more people come to the table and have this conversation. Why do you think it is that the subject isn't something that's spoken about more often? Why do you think it is in the shadows so much?
I think there's a few reasons for it. One, it's kind of a dark thing, and we don't want to believe that something like that could happen in our country, much less in our community, right? As you said, in our backyard, in our neighborhoods. People have some films have done a disservice to survivors of trafficking and those being currently victimized. So movies like Taken. Sometimes you say what you do, and people say, "Oh, I saw the movie Taken," and I say, well, that's not really what it looks like, And they say, "What do you mean?" And so Pretty Woman is another one, that's kind of famous out there in that space, and it sort of glamorizes that lifestyle and not realizing that for most people, it's not a choice, but it's a perceived choice of a lot of people. And so, so I think that because of some of the movies and people's vision of what it is or what it looks like, and then not wanting to believe that that's happening here, makes people want to shy away from the topic. It's not. I mean, I talk about it at, football tailgates. I'll talk about it anywhere. But when people say, "What do you do?" and you say, if I said, "Oh, I'm in marketing and we do this and these are my clients," people, want to engage me. You say, "Oh, I work with survivors of human trafficking," and they go, "Oh, I'll be right back," which actually isn't totally true. A lot of people want to know more because they say, well, they start talking about it and they go, "Well, wait, back up a minute. You're telling me it happens here?" And I say, "Yes." And then they say, "But what do you mean? You said you work with victims who are in jail. Why are they in jail?" And I had to explain that a lot of survivors of trafficking end up in the legal system more so than perpetrators because it's by design of the trafficker, right? To keep themselves at arm's length, to have other people commit the crimes for them, or potentially in the act of trying to get away from a trafficker, something happens and they find themselves, in the criminal legal system. And they're going, unidentified and misidentified when they get there because only what's on the surface is what's seen. So, drug possession, straightforward. This is kind of what the law says about that. Or there is some people would say, "Oh, that's just a prostitute," again, as if it was a choice. And so people are unaware that so many victims the abuse is not just what happens to them on the outside, but the fact that they end up in jail and with a criminal record that follows them around, so that even when they get out of the life, they continue to have hurdles to jump.
So I think, one of the things that really stood out to me when I learned more about this was, that's how you're finding clients, but a lot of folks, maybe haven't yet come in contact with the criminal justice system, and they may not even know themselves that they're a victim of human trafficking. Can you tell our listeners how something like that is even possible?
Yeah, that is one of the biggest reasons that we don't know for sure how, what the prevalence is because of the nature of the crime. So as you said, most people who have been victimized don't recognize themselves as victims. So they're not coming forward in the same way somebody who is a victim of another crime might come forward. I get robbed, I call the police, or something like that. It's a little closer to domestic violence, but we've learned a lot over the years. People understand that better. There are people who will reach out for help, who are victims of domestic violence, but even that's hard. So think of a survivor of human trafficking in a similar way, which is that in our country, it tends to happen in the context of intimate partner relationships and in families. And so it's really hard for the victim to see. It happens over time. There's a term we use in our industry called grooming, which is exactly what the trafficker does. They're most of the time in it for the long game. So they will build a relationship just like, you might with somebody that you're interested in. So before I know it, I'm in a relationship with somebody that I think cares about me. And then they start to gradually increase my trust or dependence on them. And they start to push my boundaries. So I might start to do things I wouldn't normally choose to do because they're making it sound like it's for us, or it's for, something that I want, and it's only for a short time. And then I start to do those things. And before I realize it, I feel kind of caught in that. I don't really realize how I got there, and I want to get out, but I don't know how. And I have maybe a misplaced loyalty to this person who I think, despite the abuse, despite doing things that maybe I'm uncomfortable doing, that in the end, it's going to give me what I want.
So I want to talk a little bit more about that, but before we do, you are listening to America's Healthiest City on ESPN Richmond 106.1, part of the Mike King Biz Media Network. Today we're speaking to Lisa Kersey from Freekind. We're talking about human trafficking, a sensitive subject, but an important subject, because we need to raise awareness for this, and we need to make sure that it's not something that continues to be swept under the rug. So we'll talk a little bit more about victimhood and kind of that trap that people find themselves in. So you kind of talk about the economic disempowerment that occurs, so they don't necessarily have those financial resources to go out and seek help. But they've also largely been isolated sometimes from their social connections, so they don't necessarily have those people to reach out to. Can you speak a little bit more about what are the different points in this tragedy that people are finding out that this is happening to them? Is it often, when they come to the criminal justice system, or is it sometime before then? The stories that you're hearing from victims, what's common? What do you guys hear?
Yeah, that's a good question. Every story is unique, even though there's a common thread. So one really important thing for people to remember is that it doesn't look one way. In fact, Polaris Project, which runs the Human Trafficking Hotline, did a study just a few years ago, and they identified 30 different typologies of human trafficking in the U.S. alone. So all that means is that there's at least 30 ways we know it looks. And that includes both the labor and the sex trafficking side of that criminal industry. And so I think it just really varies. For some people, it is a really horrific buyer experience. So the person buying that time with them, buying the use of their body in the sex trafficking world. If they might have a really rough experience, be dumped out on the side of a road. Somebody comes along and finds them. Hopefully law enforcement or somebody who really cares, and that's kind of a wake up call for them. Or a lot of times these folks are trafficking certainly more than one person. And so there even starts to be these strange dynamics between the people being trafficked. And as I start to maybe, if I've been around a while and if I'm losing favor, so to speak, with my trafficker and somebody else's, then I have this moment of like, this isn't working for me anymore. And maybe I want to get out. It can be, just the final straw, like I say many times in domestic violences, of the trafficker's abuse, that I decide to get out, or I am talking to somebody else in the life who's maybe gotten out or trying to get out, and I learn about that there is another path. Because one of the things, that traffickers do, we talk at Freekind about the ideas of freedom, hope, and belonging. And that truly what's happening is those are, common to all of our humanity. But for a victim of trafficking, the trafficker has literally stolen away their freedom, literally deciding, what they can do, when they can do it, how they can do it, for how long. There's quotas usually on what is expected from them. There is, even over their daily life habits, tells them when they can sleep, when they can eat, withholds money most of the time, sometimes might give them some of it for a sense of control, but really they're controlling the money and how their time is spent and where they go. Often they take their ID documents. So it's harder for them to kind of leave because they don't have an identification that says I am who I say that I am. And so all of those things happen, and they really are starting to dehumanize them over time. So back to your question of like, how do they realize or how do they get out? Sometimes that dehumanization is so bad that they become kind of a shell of themselves. So until somebody else recognizes it, hopefully in the criminal legal continuum, then they have a chance to get out. But they don't even think there's a way out because that idea of hope has also been crushed by their trafficker. They believe that that's all they're good for, or that's the only way they can make a living, or there are threats against them that, if you leave me, I'll find you and I'll kill you, or I've learned a lot about you. I might go after a family member. And, when somebody threatens that, especially after you've been through that process with them, you believe those threats to be real. And sometimes they do act on them. And so there's examples of that. And so those who are experiencing it really believe that will happen, and they tend not to get out on their own. Sometimes I don't want to use this phrase, but really kind of age out, if you will. Mm-hmm. So as they start to get older and their trafficker is starting to recruit younger and younger people, don't mishear me either. Older people get trafficked. Mm-hmm. We have a client we've worked with. We met her when she was 60 years old. Now, at that point, she wasn't actively being trafficked, but no one had ever recognized her after decades of abuse of being a trafficking victim. So she was still getting caught up in the system for crimes related to her trauma. And that's when we came alongside her. But as somebody gets older, or as a trafficker does get caught, whether it's for trafficking or sometimes they're caught on something lesser, a drug charge or something like that, and if they get put away, then that gives a chance and an opening for somebody to leave.
So I know that awareness is a big part of this, and we'll talk a little bit later about ways that we can all be armed to know. But prevention is an area of focus for you. Can you talk a little bit about how you guys view prevention, and we can also talk a little bit about support services too. But prevention is a unique, in my mind, How would you go about preventing trafficking?
Yeah, so thank you for that question. One big part of the work we do is focus purely on prevention, and prevention specifically for youth. The reality is that of the studies that are out there, a lot of people, their trafficking began when they were, young, and it sometimes continues, or it sometimes can end there. Sometimes the abuse occurs in childhood, the trafficking starts in adulthood. So it happens all those different ways. But the reality is, of all the clients we've served, and our current caseload is 165 clients a month, and that doesn't mean 165 new every month, but this was a long journey with them. But most of their stories, over 90% of them, 95, I would say even, they have shared some sort of abuse from childhood. So knowing that that's a part of their history, something that opened up a vulnerability of them. Because at the end of the day, while there's, federal definition of trafficking as being force, fraud, or coercion, at the end of the day, the root of trafficking is the exploitation of someone's vulnerability. So that vulnerability gets opened up early in life. And we know from, again, studies that have been done out there, that those who have been, have experienced childhood abuse, physical, sexual, been in an abusive home where they've observed it towards another person in the house, all of those kind of high ACE score kind of things, adverse childhood experiences, can contribute to people's vulnerability. Kids who have been through the foster care system, kids who have had, intersection with juvenile justice. We know that they're at higher risk. And so knowing that we're meeting people who have that in their childhood, we are equally committed to preventing the next generation from being trafficked. So we have a curriculum that we developed with some together with survivors and law enforcement, social workers, educators, curriculum specialists to get into our schools, into the middle schools and into the high schools, and made it so it's really turnkey, easy for a teacher to pick up and put into their class, whether it's through history or through family life education, so that we're really equipping and empowering them because, we know from the neuroscientists that our brains aren't fully connected until we're 26. So, we are even working with people at the college level because they have unique vulnerabilities. And, when you're a child, especially in this age of the internet, it's lots of places. So it's not happening, quote unquote, so much out on the street. It's not happening with the white van pulling up and kidnapping kids. I'm not telling you that doesn't ever happen, but I'm telling you that the majority of time, the victim knows their trafficker. And so we want to help kids understand that, all dating sites are not what they seem. All, you're on a gaming platform, anything with a chat room. You're talking to people that don't know, that want to know more about you. And we forget, we kind of feel like we're in our own bubble and we give away a lot of personally identifiable information. We do it on social media, all the apps that are out there. They're hard to keep up with, right? But the kids keep up with them. And we want them not to feel like they, are unsafe in the world. Instead, we're trying to equip them with the knowledge to recognize it in themselves or in their friends so that they cannot be lured into it. And kids who have gone through our class have said, I had no idea how close my one friend was until I took this class. There was a student one time whose boyfriend had trafficked her, and she didn't know there was a word for what happened to her until she took this class. And then she was able to get the help that she needed. There was a young man at one of the schools that partners with us, and he approached his teacher and said, I don't think I can take this course. You don't know what you're asking me to do. And his teacher just said, tell me what's going on. And he said, well, this is my family business. This is how we put food on the table. And you're asking me to turn against that. And he said, I'm not telling you to do anything. I'm just, I'm here not to tell you what to do, but to make sure that you are, to tell you what to think. I'm here to help you to think, to make sure you are thinking about it, and just encouraged him along the way to stick with the class and to have conversations with the women in his family, not just the men. And by the time the class was over, he said, I don't want to have anything to do with this. It had been normalized in his family. And that's what we forget. A lot of things, you can use a simple example of like, you have a roommate or a spouse or significant other that you live with, and you look at them and you say, why are you letting the dishwasher that way? Who does that? Why do you do this way? Like, we all have those things that we grew up with. And those are like the silly things. But the reality is that some of these behaviors, some of this abuse is normalized in children's lives, but they don't realize that that's not normal.
Well, I want to talk a little bit about how we can be equipped, but I also want to talk about the services that you provide to victims, because it's important, and then how people can connect to the mission. So 1 second.
Thank you for listening to America's Healthiest City on My King Biz Radio Network.
All right. If you haven't checked out americashealthiestcity.com, please pop over there and take a look at the ideas board. Consider becoming an ambassador. Today in the studio, we have Lisa Kersey from Freekind, an organization that is working to provide prevention, awareness, and support services for victims of human trafficking, whether that be sex trafficking or labor trafficking, or really, I imagine there are other kinds of trafficking, but people being exploited for economic purposes. Let's talk about services, because folks that have found themselves into the world of human trafficking maybe have come out and identified what are some of the problems that they're facing, and how are you guys providing service to those folks to get them into a more stable life?
Yeah, great. So we kind of are unique in the space of human trafficking in that we don't have the bricks and mortar that some programs have. We partner with programs and refer to them. But the role that we play is kind of what we talked about earlier, which is so many victims don't realize they're victims. And so there's an identification gap. And so we go into the jails and we teach a class, and we talk about healthy relationships and healthy boundaries, this thing called trafficking, what it looks like, how it happens. And you kind of almost literally can see light bulbs going off for people. So identification is the first step. Once identified, and we don't usually have to tell them, right? They end up self-identifying as a result of participating in the class. And then if they want our services, then from there, what we do is we try to work in advance of their sentencing hearing. And we try to help them jump that first big hurdle, which is getting out of jail and being able to move forward with their healing process. So we work behind the scenes with the public defender, obviously with the client themselves, with the probation officer, sometimes even the Commonwealths, to be able to show up at court and be able to testify, not to, we're not the legal resource. They have their own attorneys, but it's testifying to our services, to the formal assessment we've done to identify them as either a victim of human trafficking or what's called commercial sexual exploitation, which is kind of a fine line, but it just means basically that maybe I can't prove force, fraud, or coercion, but the rest of it is still the same, the abuse that's happening. And then we are able to, for those who choose a long-term restorative program, which we lay out that as a choice for people. We don't tell them what to do. They've had their choice taken away for a long time. And we want them to be re-empowered to take control of their own lives. And so we work with them if they want to apply to a program to help them do that. So when we show up in court that day, everybody can be on the same page, sometimes, not always. But also we're presenting the judge with an instant alternative to sending somebody back to jail. And so many times they get bonded out to a long-term restorative program. And so we're able to then get them to the program. And then they're taking care of full wraparound services, counseling, life skills, safe place to live and eat and sleep and start to rebuild their trust in people, in humanity. And so that's about 30% of our clients at any one time. We get into programs. We work with something called the Sheltered Alliance Network, which is an amazing group that has pre-vetted programs across the country. We work with that network. There's 30 something of them. And that's one big step. For those who maybe they've been through a program and they just slipped up again, kind of fell back into substance use or got picked up on a probation violation, something like that. And they don't really need a program again. They just need help truly transitioning into the community. Or if they just don't choose a program but want to transition in the community, then we help prepare them for that. So we support them with transitional things like finding a safe place to live, maybe, helping take care of a first month's rent or a security deposit, setting up utilities, something like that to get them on their feet because they're coming out of jail with nothing. Mm-hmm. I mean, and so, connecting them to, but a safe place to live is one of the first things we need, or shelter until they get to a program, or some sort of, temporary housing until they can get permanent housing. But as you know, even for, you or I, the job market the housing market mm-hmm. is tight and it's expensive right now. So it's extra hard when you come with a criminal record. So helping navigate with somebody, working with people in the community. So if anybody's listening who's in real estate, we'd love to have you become, partners in that you could be part of helping somebody start their life over and not just toss them out because you do the background check, and it comes up with mm-hmm. something on it, because 9 times out of 10 it's going to. And so we help them navigate that and get their housing. We help prepare them for jobs. We connect them to resources who help. I mean, we often work with, there's a program in our area where we can get computers for really cheap. And we'll get them a computer so that they can get their resume together. We partner. We live on partnerships. No one person or organization can do everything that needs to be done, but there's a lot of people doing a lot of good work. And so we just help them navigate it because they're coming out. You and I grow up and we start to learn, and we have most of the time parents or caregivers who are giving us some instruction along the way. Some people have not had that. Mm-hmm. Some people have. And so it's a case-by-case basis, but we just really help them navigate those steps to get their basic needs met, help them to get back on their feet with housing, with a job, and with the support they need even on the counseling side as well, so that we're just reducing those vulnerabilities and really giving them, not just offering them and talking about what we call our off-ramps program, not just offering them an off-ramp to freedom, but actually helping them each step along the way.
Well, before we run out of time, I want to make sure that we devote, a chunk to awareness for us and what we can mm-hmm. do, empowering us as individuals to recognize and respond to instances that we might be concerned about. So, mm-hmm. We all kind of know that flight attendants on airplanes kind of have the tools here and know what to look for. What are some things that we might look for as just everyday people as we're out and about in the community And if we do see something that we're concerned about,
Mm-hmm.
what would be the best thing to do?
Yeah, that's great. So the truth is that you are more often going to see it in somebody you know or are around on a regular basis than you are like a complete stranger. But there are instances where people are brought in groups, say into massage parlors, etc. So again, to my friends in commercial real estate out there, you know, I encourage you to put it into your lease. Just make it a little, you know, a section or a page that just says, hey, this happens. We don't want it to happen where you're renting space. We don't want it to happen on our property. So if you see something, say something. That whole adage, it's true. So there's been times, you know, we sort of can get in our zone of like, oh, well, maybe, you know, we talk ourselves out of things that we think we're seeing. I just encourage people not to do that. If you see something that doesn't look right, it probably isn't. And so just report it, and it's okay. The National Human Trafficking Hotline, as I mentioned, you should put that number in your phone. I think it's 888-373-7888. I have to remember it. But put it in your phone so that when you see something, the number is already there. To go back and try to find where you wrote it down or where you heard about it, you know, is going to be hard to do. So I just encourage people to put that in their phone, make the call. You can be anonymous, you can give your name, but the goal is if you do see something that's in a situation of a stranger or somebody you know, just try to, before you call, write down as many details as you can remember about, you know, what the victim might have looked like, what the trafficker looked like, if there was a car involved and a license plate, where you were specifically, and, you know, details of what you saw that you thought was suspicious. And then let them take it from there. You never know if your call is the one that's actually going to save somebody from continuing in a life of abuse. So that's again more on the stranger side. On the personal side, you can look for things like you know, sudden shifts in their values or their behavior that seem off to you if you're a friend or family member. Somebody who's been dating somebody online and seems really serious about somebody they've never met before, but it's been an online relationship. It could be that all of a sudden they're getting all these lavish gifts from somebody. If they are maybe significantly older and they're with a young person, you got to wonder, you know, what that's all about. So if they seem mismatched, that's a thing. Traffickers often try to isolate people from their friends and family, like you said before, to disconnect them from the people who could help them. And so if somebody is all of a sudden not going out and doing the things with the friends they used to, or not, you know, calling or talking to friends and doing the things they used to do, but seem to spend all their time with this other person, it may not be trafficking, but it certainly is a red flag to look at. But there's a lot of also industry-specific training. We do some of that. There's other great organizations doing that as well. All the way from the criminal legal system, who they're mostly going to run into first. So we want them to be aware so that they can get the help faster. It could be in healthcare. I believe the statistics are, you know, 85 or 90% of trafficking victims intersected with the healthcare system at some point. And so if healthcare workers know what to do, and they do in this area, and Bonnie Price and her team, the forensic team in our area, do a fantastic job of that. They're very aware and know what's going on. So knowing what questions to ask or what to look out for. If somebody is talking for somebody else, answering the questions that are directed at them, red flag, you know, that something's going on. If the person doesn't know where they are, so a lot of times traffickers will move people around to confuse them. They don't seem to know where they are, or they don't have their own ID cards in their possession. That's problematic. If they've, you know, been in a lot of cities or have a lot of hotel keys with them, like, that's, you know, a sign that something's probably off. So those are just some of the things that people can look for.
It's definitely a topic that deserves more time, and so we don't get in trouble with ESPN, I'm going to ask you to tell people how they can find you out there, but we do want to have you back because I know that there's more to this subject.
Yeah, thanks so much, Will. So yeah, you can check us out on freekindva.org to learn more about the issue and about our organization and how you might be able to get involved, whether you're an individual, whether it's through your employer, you want to bring the attention to them, or a church. Any of those we love to partner with, but we're looking for more corporate partners all the time to help us do this work. As I said, we can't do it alone, and the more people that know, the more people who can help to disrupt it.
Well, thanks for coming on with me today. I appreciate the conversation very much, and again, we're going to have you back. This has been America's Healthiest City. Please join me every week. ESPN Richmond 106.1 Thursday mornings at 6 a.m. Catch the full episodes on YouTube and find our socials at America's Healthiest City.